There was something sacred about Marcus's nighttime ritual. After a long day of numbers, polite office chatter, and the clamor of everyday life, the house would fall into a hush. Emily would disappear upstairs, probably with her face buried in one of her mystery thrillers, and Marcus would settle into his armchair, the old leather one that creaked with familiarity. He'd pour himself 2 fingers of whiskey, tug a soft throw over his lap, and scroll through his podcast feed with the care of someone choosing their last meal. His preference? True crime and relationship drama. Not the overproduced, cinematic kind, but the raw ones. Anonymous confessions. Real people. Real mistakes. Something about listening to others unravel made his own life feel stable by contrast. Secure. That night, he was in the mood for something new. He skipped past his usual shows and landed on a freshly uploaded episode in a series he hadn't followed before. The title was oddly specific, Confessions of a Cheating Wife. The description offered no guest names, just the promise of a deeply personal, anonymous account of manipulation and betrayal. He pressed play. A soft instrumental intro played for a few seconds. Then came the voice. A woman's voice. Laughing softly at first, like she was unsure whether to be amused or ashamed. But as she spoke, her tone shifted, gaining confidence, pride even. And Marcus sat up straighter. His glass froze mid-air. Because the voice wasn't just familiar. It was Emily's. Not maybe, not kind of. It was her cadence, her subtle way of drawing out vowels, the slightly breathy lilt at the end of her sentences. He'd spent 10 years falling asleep to that voice. Waking up to it. Planning his future with it. But this version of her? He didn't recognize her at all. She spoke about hiding things, bank accounts, small withdrawals, cash stashed in places he'd never find. She mentioned her husband as if he were a stranger. A good man, she called him. Too sweet. Too dumb to ever figure it out. Marcus's stomach turned at the phrase. Then came the part that made his hands go cold. She talked about intimacy. With someone she referred to only as M. Said it started as something innocent, but became addictive. She described moments. Hotel rooms. Quick escapes under the guise of self-care weekends. Lying used to make her anxious, now, she said, it made her feel alive. Marcus sat there motionless, the episode still playing, but the words turned into white noise. His breath shallowed. He didn't know if he was shocked or furious or devastated, maybe all 3. Maybe none of those emotions had fully caught up to him yet. All he knew was that something inside him had gone completely still. She laughed again. This time without guilt. Said she felt invincible. That the rush came from the secrecy. The power of pulling strings, moving pieces, orchestrating a life where she could have everything. Her final words in the segment were a punch to the ribs. He'd never see it coming. I mean, he still thinks I'm the best thing that ever happened to him. Marcus paused the audio. The house was quiet. The heater kicked on with a low hum. Upstairs, he could hear Emily's faint footsteps across the floorboards. Maybe brushing her teeth. Maybe folding laundry. Just another quiet night in the suburban dream they'd built together. Except now, that dream had a crack down the middle. A jagged, splintered line that started with the sound of her voice and ended in a place he didn't recognize. He rewound the episode. Started again from the top. Listened with intent this time, catching inflections, timestamps, words she used that she'd used in real life. Pet phrases. Patterns. He opened a notebook and began to write. The handwriting was slow at first. Just a few words, question marks. Then full sentences. Connections. Ideas. As the episode ended, Marcus didn't move. He stared down at the page in his lap, his fingers curled loosely around the pen, his jaw set in a tight line. He didn't shout. Didn't run upstairs to demand answers. There'd be no Hollywood confrontation, no flying dishes or screaming accusations. That wasn't his style. No, Marcus would plan. He would be patient. Because now, he had a new ritual. And this time, it wouldn't end with headphones and a whiskey glass. It would end with truth. With exposure. And with a reckoning. The kind no one, especially Emily, would ever see coming. After that night, something in Marcus shifted. He moved through each day like a man wearing a mask, smiling, responding at the right moments, playing the part of the unsuspecting husband. But under the surface, every movement became deliberate. Every moment turned into surveillance. He didn't confront Emily. Not yet. That would have been too easy. Too impulsive. He wanted to see the full picture before stepping onto the battlefield. So he watched. And what he saw was far worse than he expected. Now that his eyes were open, Emily's lies were everywhere. They clung to her like perfume, sweet, polished, but unmistakably artificial. She told him she was working late 3 times that week, but Marcus remembered clearly, she'd left her last job months ago. Something about a toxic work environment. She hadn't started anywhere new. At least, not that she'd told him. Then came the weekend trip. Supposedly to care for her mom, who'd tweaked her back. But Emily's mom, God bless her, had posted a carousel of beach photos that same Saturday, cocktails in hand, wide-brimmed hat, smiling on the Amalfi Coast. Marcus stared at the screen and felt nothing. Not anger. Not sadness. Just a deeper kind of confirmation. A hollow nod to the fact that he hadn't been crazy that night with the podcast. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. So he began collecting data. He kept a log of every lie. Every mismatch in her story. He tracked where she went using the GPS access they'd once shared for convenience. When she said she was at the office, she was parked outside a nondescript townhouse in the city. He memorized the license plate that was often parked beside her. The next step required more precision. He reached out, discreetly, to a voice analysis expert. A guy who specialized in forensic linguistics, audio comparison, and legal-grade reporting. It took a week. The report came back. 97.4% match. The voice on the podcast was Emily's. Statistically undeniable. The report detailed the alignment in tone, pitch, sentence structure, even emotional cadence. It wasn't just the same voice, it was the same person. Marcus stared at the number. Then closed the file and saved it in a password-protected folder labeled Insurance. But the question remained. Who was M? It was a simple detail at first. A single slip from Emily during a phone call that she thought he hadn't overheard. Something about meeting up with Mike. Nothing suspicious on its own. Until it happened again. And again. The more he listened, the more the pieces started falling into place. Mike. Michael. The same Michael who'd been his best friend since college. The one who helped him move into his first apartment. The one who stood beside him on his wedding day and toasted Emily with tears in his eyes. The guy who called Marcus brother every time they spoke. That Michael. The same Michael who held him when Marcus's dad passed. Who showed up with scotch and silence, knowing that grief didn't need words. And now, apparently, the man his wife called her secret. The betrayal took on a new weight. Not just Emily's deceit, but Michael's. The two people who knew him best had carved out a life behind his back, using stolen hours, calculated silence, and his own blind trust. But they hadn't just taken time. They'd taken money. Marcus wasn't sure what made him check the accounts. Maybe a gut feeling. Maybe that offhand comment Emily made about needing to tighten the budget. But when he dug into the financials, the truth hit hard. Small withdrawals at first. Spread across months. Never enough to draw attention on their own. But cumulatively, over $20,000 missing from their joint savings. Disguised as random expenses. Transfers to a consulting account that didn't exist. And every withdrawal was timed perfectly, right before one of Emily's trips. Or one of Michael's out-of-town weekends. The pattern was almost elegant in its precision. Marcus sat at his desk, looking at the spreadsheet he'd built. Each row told a story. A story of betrayal mapped out in dollars, dates, and deceit. A narrative he'd been living in without ever knowing it. Still, he didn't lose it. No outburst. No confrontation. That wasn't his way. Instead, he did something that surprised even himself. He smiled. Because now, the game had changed. They thought he was too trusting. Too slow to notice. Too soft to act. But what they'd mistaken for weakness was calculation. What they saw as obliviousness was restraint. And now, Marcus had everything he needed: proof, motive, names, numbers. He began writing again. But this time, it wasn't just notes. It was a plan. He didn't want just revenge. He wanted precision. He wanted it to unfold slowly, publicly, and with undeniable clarity. He wanted them both to watch their carefully built lives collapse like a house of cards, brought down by the man they thought was too sweet, too dumb, too safe. Marcus wasn't a violent man. But he was thorough. And when the truth came, it would arrive like a freight train. Calm. Loud. Unstoppable. He looked up from his desk, the quiet hum of the house surrounding him. Somewhere upstairs, Emily was probably texting Michael. Smiling to herself. Thinking she still had the upper hand. Let her think it. For now. Their anniversary fell on a Friday that year. 11 years married. Marcus circled the date on the calendar weeks in advance, just like he always did. Emily made a passing comment about wanting to keep it low-key this year, and he nodded, played along. But behind the scenes, he had already been working on something entirely different. There would be nothing low-key about what he was planning. He booked a private chef through a boutique catering service, someone local but highly rated, with a specialty in intimate, high-end meals. He chose a 4-course menu based on their favorites, though Emily hadn't really eaten with him in weeks. The dining room was cleaned and polished, the lights dimmed just right. Candles lined the center of the table like a glowing runway of romantic illusion. Marcus even picked out a playlist. Jazz. Soft. Elegant. He dressed well, nothing flashy, just classic. Navy blazer, white shirt, the watch Emily gave him years ago. He made sure it still ticked, even though he hadn't worn it in months. The house felt like a movie set, everything in place, carefully staged. Even the wine was decanted, breathing in tall-stemmed glasses. The illusion had to be perfect. It had to look like the kind of night she would expect from a man who still loved her. When Emily walked in, Marcus was already seated at the table. She wore red, deep, silky, dramatic. The kind of dress meant to stun. Her makeup was flawless. She smiled with just enough effort to make it seem real. And in that moment, watching her glide into the room as if nothing were broken, Marcus knew she believed she had won. That the little cracks she left behind had gone unnoticed. That he was still blind, still safe. She took her seat opposite him, crossing her legs like a woman confident in her position. He poured her wine, offered the chef's first course with a smile that never wavered. She complimented the setup, almost amused by the extravagance. He nodded, said little, letting her fill the space with whatever version of reality she wanted to live in for now. As they ate, Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box, smooth, matte black, with a silver ribbon. He slid it across the table. Her fingers hesitated only briefly before she took it. Inside were brand new AirPods. She looked up at him, clearly puzzled. Her brows knit with a mixture of confusion and anticipation, trying to decode the gesture. A practical gift for such a dramatic setting. It didn't quite fit. But Marcus just smiled. Then, casually, he tapped his phone, already queued up, volume adjusted. The room filled with her voice. That same voice from the podcast, the one she never thought would make its way into her real life. Soft, sultry, too casual for the things she was saying. She talked about hotel rooms. How she'd sneak away for afternoons of intimacy with that beautiful fool. She called herself a master manipulator, proud of how well she'd played the game. She described stashing money from the joint account. How Marcus would never notice, because he was too busy being the perfect husband. She laughed at herself, and at him. At how easy it all was. The wine glass slipped from her fingers. It didn't fall in slow motion. It crashed instantly, loud and sharp against the tile. Red splashed like blood across the white tablecloth. For a moment, everything was still. Emily didn't move. Her face, once so animated, drained of color. She stared at Marcus as though he had pulled a mask off his own face, revealing something terrifying underneath. But his expression didn't change. It stayed calm. Steady. He reached into the folder by his side, the same one he had kept tucked away for weeks. He opened it and removed the voice match report. Neatly printed, highlighted, notarized. He slid it across the table to where the broken glass glittered like tiny daggers. Her eyes scanned the top line. The number, 97.4%, might as well have been carved into stone. Marcus watched her. Watched the way her chest rose in shallow, rapid breaths. The way her hand hovered over the report but never touched it. She looked down at the shattered stemware, then up at the candles, then back to him, as if any of those things could anchor her back to the world she thought she controlled. But that world was gone now. The lies she lived in had collapsed with a simple push of a button. The rest of the dinner sat untouched. The music played on in the background, too soft to cover the silence between them. Marcus remained seated, poised, like a man savoring the last move in a long game of chess. Emily didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Everything had already been said, in her own voice, no less. Marcus rose from his seat slowly, folded the report back into the folder, and placed it under his arm. He paused, letting the silence stretch a moment longer. Then he turned and walked away, leaving behind the candles, the broken glass, and a woman who suddenly realized the only fool in the room was her. She had expected roses and forgiveness. Instead, she got her own confession on replay. And Marcus? He didn't look back. The aftermath began before the candles had even burned out. Emily sat at that anniversary table long after Marcus left the room, surrounded by soft jazz, untouched food, and the twisted remains of a shattered wine glass. Her hands trembled over the napkin in her lap, folding and unfolding it, as if she could somehow reset the moment. But the recording had echoed too loudly. Her words had cut too deep. And Marcus's silence had said everything. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He had already pulled the final thread, and the fabric of her illusion had begun to collapse. When she finally stood, the room seemed colder, smaller. Everything she'd built on secrets now echoed around her like a haunted house. Upstairs, her phone buzzed. Notifications pinged relentlessly. But these weren't her usual likes or messages from Michael. These were different, sharper, urgent. Something was spreading. The podcast. Her podcast. It had found an audience. A large one. Apparently, the episode had been clipped, shared, and posted in a Reddit thread on r/truecrimeconfessions just hours earlier. "Guess who I just recognized," read one of the top comments. The post gained traction instantly, an anonymous confession dissected by thousands of strangers hungry for scandal. Audio engineers, voice experts, and social sleuths all joined in the hunt. And then, quietly, someone dropped a link to a voice analysis report. Her voice. Her exact voice. Matched, analyzed, and backed by data. The same voice that bragged about cheating, laughed about stolen money, and called her husband too dumb to figure it out. That post alone hit over 10,000 upvotes in hours. Screenshots were everywhere. Audio comparisons were being made. Comments flooded in. Some were horrified. Others amused. Many outraged. But almost all agreed, she was the woman behind the voice. The internet had decided, and once it did, there was no undoing it. Her name wasn't even attached to the original episode. But now, she was famous. Infamous. Her Instagram, once a curated shrine of brunches, couple photos, and gym selfies, became a battlefield overnight. Comment after comment lit up her posts, some mocking, some vile, others just curious. She turned off comments, but it was already too late. Her DMs overflowed. Screenshots of her pictures paired with transcribed podcast quotes spread like wildfire. The mask she'd so carefully crafted online had cracked in public view. Her curated, filtered world turned to ash. Meanwhile, Marcus had already moved to step 2. He'd visited the courthouse the week before, quietly, efficiently. The divorce papers had already been filed, signed, and processed. He didn't make a scene. He didn't announce it. He simply prepared the documents, paid the expedited fee, and made arrangements. And Michael? He received his copy that very night. A mutual friend, a man who once thought Michael was the kind of friend worth raising a glass to, agreed to deliver the documents. Hand-delivered, right to Michael's office. Same time the podcast was making its rounds online. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. By the time Emily's phone lit up again with a call from Michael, it wasn't a call of excitement. It was panic. Something had gone wrong at work. HR wanted to discuss the matter of recent allegations. There were whispers through the hallways now, someone had recognized his voice too. Or maybe it was just guilt on his face that gave him away. Small industry. Big gossip. Michael didn't last the week. A quiet resignation followed. No official reason given. But Marcus knew the truth was working its way through the corridors. The kind of truth that didn't need shouting to cause damage. And the house? No longer hers. Marcus had refinanced it days earlier. Quietly removed her name from the deed with the help of a well-connected attorney. Everything was airtight. The property was now solely his. The couch she picked out, the mirror she hung above the mantel, the patio set she bragged about buying, it all belonged to him now. When she finally tried to corner him, desperate for an explanation, pleading for understanding, the door didn't open. Not literally. Not figuratively. Marcus had nothing left to give her. No more reactions. No more explanations. Just quiet, calculated distance. The neighbors had started to notice. Suburban streets don't keep secrets for long. People whispered. Some stared. Others avoided eye contact. The couple that once looked so put together were now a cautionary tale. But Marcus didn't shrink from it. He walked their quiet block with a calm, unbothered stride. Grocery runs, gym visits, weekend errands, he moved through it all like a man finally breathing clean air. He wasn't angry. He was free. Each piece of this fallout had been measured. Nothing impulsive. Just quiet justice. Emily had destroyed trust with whispers, side glances, and late-night texts. Marcus had responded with facts, evidence, and a truth she couldn't scrub away. Now, while she scrambled to clean up the mess, to find a new story to spin, he simply continued forward. The podcast had done what it needed to do. She had told on herself. All Marcus had done was give her the stage. And she had performed exactly as expected. The move wasn't dramatic. Marcus didn't post a farewell or give speeches to friends and neighbors. He packed his things carefully, methodically, keeping what mattered, discarding the rest. The house he once cherished had become too full of echoes. Too many ghosts lived in the corners. Laughter that wasn't real. Plans that never meant anything. Even the furniture felt like it had been arranged around a lie. So, he left. Not to escape, but to begin. He found a place a few states away. Smaller. Older. A quiet house tucked at the edge of a sleepy town with no connection to his past. No whispers, no curious glances, no neighbors watching his front door for signs of drama. Just peace. And space. Enough of it to finally exhale. He didn't chase distractions. Didn't leap into the arms of someone new to prove he was still desirable. He wasn't interested in flings, or in validation from strangers. What he wanted was solitude. Honesty. Even if it was lonely at times. The days moved slowly at first. Too much silence. Too much time to think. But eventually, he began to fill the space. Long walks. Reading. Projects around the house. And late at night, when the world felt the most honest, he turned back to the one ritual that had never betrayed him. Podcasts. Only this time, he didn't just listen. He recorded. It started small. Just a mic, a laptop, and an idea. Not about revenge or scandal, but about what came after. The quiet wreckage. The rebuilding. The questions that never got answered, and the answers that arrived too late to fix anything. He called it, Confessions of a Former Nice Guy. The name wasn't meant to be bitter. It was meant to be true. Because he'd spent years being agreeable. Trusting. Accommodating. Letting things slide. Smiling through red flags. And in the end, that kindness had made him the perfect mark. The first episode dropped quietly. No promotion. No hashtags. Just him, speaking into the dark. He didn't name names. Didn't detail every wound. That wasn't the point. Instead, he talked about masks. About the kind of love that feels like home, until you realize it was just a well-decorated prison. He talked about betrayal as a slow bleed, not a single stab. About how some lies sound like love if you hear them often enough. He shared the moment he heard the voice that changed everything. And how that moment, as brutal as it was, had set him free. And then, at the end of that first episode, he left a message. Quiet. Final. The kind of line that didn't need volume to echo. It was simple. Almost gentle. But it carried weight. That line made its way into comments. Threads. Screenshots. It was quoted, stitched into TikToks, reposted on self-help forums and breakup blogs. People didn't know his full story. But they didn't need to. They just knew he had survived something. He began to receive emails. Messages from strangers who had been through something similar. Husbands. Wives. Friends who had watched someone they loved unravel in front of them. Listeners didn't want advice. They wanted honesty. And Marcus gave them that. Episode by episode, he told the truth, not about her, but about himself. About how hard it was to rebuild trust, especially in yourself. About the moment you stop asking, why me, and start asking, what now? His voice, steady and deliberate, became something people turned to at night. Just like he once had, listening in the dark. Only now, he was the voice on the other end. Somewhere, he knew Emily had heard it. Or at least heard about it. There were no legal threats. No denials. Just silence. The kind that says everything. Her world had fallen apart in front of everyone. The podcast she once saw as a private thrill had become the very thing that burned down her public image. People didn't forget her voice. It was too distinctive. Too full of certainty and superiority. And now, no matter where she went, she carried that voice like a shadow. Marcus didn't care what became of her. Not anymore. He had moved on, but not with rage. With clarity. He had once believed that love, by default, was good. That loyalty meant something sacred. But now he understood, it's not just about giving your heart. It's about giving it to someone who won't treat it like a tool. And more than anything, he knew this. You can lie to a man's face. You can hold his hand and look him in the eye and tell him he's the only one. You can build a world of smoke and mirrors and smile while it burns. But eventually, inevitably, your voice will betray you. Just as hers had. He hoped she remembered that. Every time she hurt herself. Every time someone else did too. Every time she opened her mouth, wondering if the next person would recognize the confession she never meant to make public. Marcus didn't look back. He kept recording. Not to relive the past, but to walk through it and come out clean on the other side. His life, now, was a quiet one. Honest. Uncomplicated. A little scarred, sure. But whole. And when he looked in the mirror, for the first time in years, he saw a man who had stopped asking for peace. And simply created it.